Hello there. I don't know if it will come across in the video. Just when I think I have everything situated, I don't. I don't know if it'll come across in the video, but I am physically subdued. I have IBS, started to say international, irritable bowel syndrome, and for the past 5 years I've been in a job with a ton less stress, so it has been a ton smaller problem, but it still kicks in. There's no cure for it. It doesn't go away. It kicked in today, and it took it out of me. There was a time when I wasn't sure I was going to be able to finish the last 2 hours of my shift. I did, and for a wonder, I'm off 2 days in a row, Sunday and Monday. That doesn't happen often in asset protection, because the thieves don't take 2 days off in a row. So if I seem subdued, if I don't have my usual quota of silliness, and granted, I'm trying not to be too silly, if I seem a little less animated, that's why. If you don't notice any difference, then this explanation is for you. Moot. Let's pour as Popcorn Sutton said, some whiskey. Popcorn Sutton, his birth name was Marvin. Let me try that again a little closer to the mic. Well, that time it creaked and didn't pop. The first time it kind of went boom. Whether it comes through, I don't know. We'll pour some whiskey. Marvin Sutton, that's how he was born in Hemp Hill, close to Maggie Valley in North Carolina. You might have heard of him. He was, and I guess still is, the most famous moonshiner in history. And he did that himself. He promoted himself. He would cart a still to various public festivals, art shows, the such and such, the Podunk Azalea Festival or what have you. And he would make a run of liquor right there and sell it right there, which was illegal, and he knew it was illegal. But by the time the federal government really busted him good, he had gotten the impression that he was Popcorn Sutton and he was invincible. He was untouchable because he'd gotten away with being a public moonshiner for so long. Now, there are some moonshiners who will say they don't think they're criminals because what they're doing isn't morally wrong. They don't put it that way, but that's the idea. Well, if you break the law, you are a criminal. The law may be wrong, and what you're doing may not be wrong, but you're still a criminal. Well, Popcorn Sutton, I don't remember what year, he and his friend J.B. Rader, who has later appeared on the show Moonshiners, and it's hard to recognize the two as the same person, because by the time Moonshiners come along, J.B. Rader's health had really deteriorated. But he was in this documentary with J.B. Rader called, and I don't like to use this language, but I want to give you the exact title, "This is the last damn run of liquor I'll ever make." It wasn't. And when the feds busted him finally, instead of the state ABC folks, and he had hundreds upon hundreds in one storage building. I don't know if it was a building he owned or one he rented or what, but there were 800 gallons of liquor. And the quick phrase is illegal liquor, but what it means is liquor that the government didn't get money off of. That's the whole thing. The government wants you to license your still and pay the excise tax on each proof gallon, not because it's dangerous, isn't any more dangerous than driving in Albuquerque, but because the government wants you to give the government money for doing what many of our ancestors did without ever having to pay a single tax, perfectly legal. So that was Popcorn Sutton. That's where Wiki come from, and he may have got it from somewhere else. But the video tonight is not about Popcorn Sutton. And I don't like videos that babble and babble before they get to the point, and here I've done it. Hopefully you'll forgive me. The previous video I did, I keep wanting to say last night, and it wasn't last night, was my 5 favorite whiskeys. Tonight, what are the 5 whiskeys I recommend for beginners in whiskey? I can tell you now, this bottle, Knob Creek 9-year, it's a, get where I can see what I'm a-doing, it's a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. I think it is excellent bourbon, but it's 100 proof, and therefore I do not recommend it for a beginner. I remember when I was first starting back in September 2021, if you'd have fed me 100 proof bourbon, I'd just liable to choke to death. Now, I now think 100 proof is not high at all. That is 50% alcohol by volume. But when I was first starting, I had rarely had anything stronger than beer, and nothing stronger than beer since the 90s. So I wasn't prepared for proof, and that 80 proof stuff was, for me, at the time, pretty strong. I remember that, and I don't want to put newbies to the torture. Man, that smells good. So what are the 5 whiskeys I would recommend for beginners? Well, I've got 1 Irish whiskey, 1 corn whiskey, and 3 bourbons, because I'm a bourbon guy. Actually, I have a rye whiskey on there, 2 bourbons. I'm a bourbon guy. That's what I know best, and I am not going to recommend something that I have not myself tried. Now, it's easy for me to say that. You might think I'm telling a fib. All I can do is tell you, no, this is stuff I have actually tried. So, just as in the last video, you get to see my handwriting. I don't know if my voice carried through the paper. My handwriting, I can read it. Tain't nobody else needs to. By the way, this is number 24 in the Whisky Basics series, which I am rebuilding, so I'm getting closer to the end of it. Starting from bop to bottom. I may be subdued, but I'm still unable to speak clearly no matter how hard I try. From bottom to top, we start with, and just like the other video, by the way, the previous video, I don't have all these bottles, and those I do have. In fact, do I have any of them offhand? I don't. I do not currently have any of these whiskeys on hand. And that's a whole nother story. I'm not going to get into it, however tempting it is. But the bottom, number 5, that I would recommend is a corn whiskey from Heaven Hill. And I didn't look up these prices, by the way, and I'm not going to go back and do it now. You can check these out. None of these are going to be too expensive. They'll be 20, 25, 30, maybe 40 bucks. I'll get to the name in a second. Number 5, the bottom of the list, is from Heaven Hill Distillery. It's called Mellocorn. Now, everybody calls it Mellocorn. Well, this is not an ink pen. It's an ink pen. This is not a whiskey glass. It's a whiskey glass. This is not a glass bottle. It's a glass bottle. These are not black glasses. They're black glasses. I don't know how well you can see it. First pair of frames I've had in decades that weren't gold colored. This is not yellow paper. It's yellow paper. And the whiskey is not Mellocorn. It's Mellocorn. It's 2 words. Learn to speak English, y'all. Now, it is a corn whiskey. I don't remember what the mash bill is. I think if I'm remembering correctly, and don't quote me on this because I ain't going to swear to it. I can't guarantee it. I believe it's a barely legal corn whiskey, which means 80% corn. By law, corn whiskey has to be at least 80% corn in the mash bill. It is... I haven't found many corn whiskeys, and of those I've found, almost half I haven't liked. Corn whiskey is not a big category. There's not a lot of demand for it, and yet when you do it right, it can be real good. It tends to, on my palate, be sour, at least to an extent, and I think that's the grain forwardness that comes from the fact that you have to use either new uncharred barrels or used charred barrels. It doesn't get as much from the wood in the same amount of time. But it's a good corn whiskey. It doesn't cost much, and it's been around since 1945, and except for minor changes that the federal government dictated, they're using the same label as they have since 1945. Next is an Irish whiskey, and this is standing in for all Irish and Scottish whiskeys, and there are people who would tell me that Irish and Scottish whiskeys are different. Now, I know enough about them, just barely enough to know that there are differences in production. I have never really been able to taste the difference between an Irish whiskey and an unpeated Scottish whiskey. To me, they're all the same type. And if you're new to whiskey, you're not going to pick up on the differences either, not when they're subtle. So, Jameson is not a single malt, and that, by the way, is not single malt. It's single malt, 2 words, meaning that it's not a 100% sprouted barley mash bill. It's a blended Irish whiskey, which means they're taking some of that, some 100% sprouted barley and some what they call grain whiskey, which is pretty much anything else, and it's more technical than that, and blending it to stretch the more expensive barley whiskey further. It's a little bit sour. It is not the greatest quality. I can tell, even though I haven't tasted the greatest quality. I know enough now about whiskey to tell that Jameson's not the best, but it's 80 proof, as I recall, anyway, low proof, and it will give you at least a basic idea of what Scottish and Irish whiskey is like. I would have this Knob Creek 9 on the list for sure, except for the 100 proof. Now, I've been drinking whiskey 4 years. 100 proof to me is nothing. As I already said, If you're brand new, 80 proof is liable to be a little much. And let me scratch these things off so I don't repeat myself any more than I'm already doing in a repetitiously redundant manner. You see, I work for the Department of Redundancy Department. Number 3 on the list, and I'm breaking the 100 proof rule here, but for the rye whiskey, I want to give you something that's not going to be really pushy rye, if that makes any sense. I thought about Bullet rye, which is 90 proof as I remember. Not had either of these in a while. But Bullet is, I used the term pushy just a second ago, and that's as good a one as it is. It's not necessarily a rye drinker's rye. It doesn't have those distinctive rye components, but it is kind of forceful on the palate if you're brand new. So Knob Creek rye, it's a barely legal rye, again, as I recall. Again, I've not had him recently. And it's not a bourbon. You can taste that it's not a bourbon, but it's not going to be so different from a bourbon that it's going to really put you off if you're tasting rye for the first time. Now, there's kind of an also-ran, which is Hard Truth High Road Rye, and it's another bourbon drinker's rye. It's extremely excellent. It's 93 proof though, and that would make it lower than the Knob Creek, but it is also more emphatic in what it delivers. If you're new, you might want something just a little more mellow. Number 2 is Four Roses 80 proof. There are some people, I believe, who still call it the yellow label because it used to have a yellow label. Now it's beige. And Four Roses does something no other distillery does. It has 10 recipes. It has, I can never keep it straight. It's either 5 mash bills and 2 yeast strains, or 2 mash bills and I believe it's 2 mash bills and 5 yeast strains. And you can take the exact same mash bill, do everything exactly the same except change the yeast, and that will change the final product. But anyway, Four Roses has those 10 recipes, and the 80 proof is a blend of all 10. I haven't had but the one bottle when I was first starting out, but that's what got me into other Four Roses, the small batch, which I really like. I now have a single barrel of the OBSF recipe. Or is that OBFS? I can't keep all it. There are people who can tell you exactly what every letter means in every one of the 10 recipes. I can't. But because the 80 proof is all 10, the small batch is just 4 recipes, and the single barrel is 1 recipe, they are not identical, not even counting changes in proof, not even taking into account single barrel variation. But if you try that Four Roses 80 proof and you like it, it will give you an indication of what else there is in Four Roses. It's a kind of a sweet, fruity whiskey. And if all I could drink was 80 proof stuff, I wouldn't mind drinking Four Roses at all. And then the number 1 on the list, and I'll be honest with you, I don't myself prefer it anymore. But this is the first whiskey I ever tasted where I took my first sniff and I was like that. I took the first sip and I said out loud, wow. The adjective that came to my mind when I was nosing and tasting my very first glass of this whiskey was voluptuous. Now, I've learned more, my palate has developed. I would not so describe it now, but it's that quality that struck me when I was a newbie that makes me put it at the top of this list. It's Maker's Mark. You may even have seen it. It's the one with the red wax dripping down, and they have trademarked that wax. So you cannot have red wax dripping down unless you want a lawsuit. If you do have a wax seal, as Knob Creek does, you have to do it in some different way. And just changing the color of the wax won't do it. That dripping is part of the trademark. You could probably use red wax, but you can't use any wax and have it drip like that. This is what they call a wheated bourbon. It's the so that's yet more variety. The other bourbon, did I say have bourbons? The other bourbon, the fourth. You know, I'm having to stop and think. Okay, Four Roses does not have a wheated bourbon recipe. Maker's Mark is what they call a wheated bourbon. The standard bourbon recipe is corn, rye, and barley. A wheated bourbon is corn, wheat, and barley. That's almost like drinking butterscotch and caramel candy with brown sugar slathered all over it and cinnamon sprinkled on top. But a lot of people, they get what they call a softer nose and taste from a wheated bourbon. I don't. I really can't distinguish them unless there's a really significant amount of wheat in there, and then it gives me eucalyptus. And I've really gotten that from Redemption wheated bourbon, which it was okay, but I didn't care for it really at the end of the bottle. And from Oregon Spirit wheat whiskey, bourbon, which is a wheated bourbon, and wheated rye. And as far as I know, that's the only wheated rye in existence. And I get that strong eucalyptus when there's a lot of wheat in there. Other people get that, what they call the softer thing. I think rye tends to give most people a spiciness. And so by softer, I think they really are just saying that spiciness is less. But Maker's Mark is an interesting whiskey. I don't know a ton about it. I'm not going to go into all of it. We're already beyond where I hope to be, although these list videos do take longer. But the way Bill Samuels, back in the 50s, came up with the recipe was he had his wife bake bread out of possible mash bills, and the one that his friends and family preferred was the recipe he used to make his whiskey. And until recently, all they made is that one mash bill, bourbon. They've started experimenting around with wheat whiskey now. And they rotate their barrels through the warehouse, so there's remarkable consistency. Most distilleries don't, so they have to pick from here, from here, from here, from this part of one rick house, from that part of another, to get the barrels so that each batch will have the same flavor profile. Maker's Mark has it easier because by rotating the barrels, they're reducing the amount of variation between each barrel. That also makes it tough to have a single barrel program because each barrel is pretty much alike, and part of the charm of a single barrel is that each one is different in some way. But Maker's Mark is not bad bourbon. It's just that it gives me a metallic, bright vanilla note that doesn't suit my palate. There are a lot of people who like it. There are a lot of people who, having started on the basic 90 proof maker's mark, then move on to their other variations, which they swear by, and maybe one of these days I'll go back and try some of those others. But those are the 5 whiskeys that right now I recommend for people who are just starting off in whiskey. Ask me in half an hour, I'm liable to have an entirely different list. Ask me in a week, yet another one. Whiskey is a very subjective thing. You can even taste the same whiskey just 2 or 3 hours apart and get different things depending on what has been going on in between. If you've had supper in between, it can change your palate. Or just the passage of time can cause your palate to vary. So what I'm saying now might not be exactly what I'm saying next time, if there's ever a next time. But that is not a bad list. It will give you some variety. It will help you understand what bourbon generally is like, what corn whiskey generally is like, Irish and Scottish whiskey, rye whiskey. And you can move on from there. You can go down whichever road attracts you the most and learn what you really like and focus on that. And after all, that's what this channel is about, helping people who are new to whiskey, doing the things all in one place that I could not find in one place 4 years ago when I was just starting. So, we take this nice little bottle out of the way. I think I've been drinking some of it. It's going down somehow. Oh, there's some silliness. You were thinking you were safe. Howsomever, I'm too tired to go through the list in my mind of all the various toasts I know, so yeehaw.